Starlight Express has made its return to the UK at long last, with a production opening in the Troubadour Theatre over in Wembley Park, and this production is very much a revival of this Andrew Lloyd Webber classic, but it's been garnering a lot of hate because it is too different from the original, which kind of sent me down a little bit of a rabbit hole, so I'm here to share with you just how different the 2024 production of Starlight Express is compared to the productions that have gone before it. Now, before we dive into the video, just a little introduction to bring you up to speed on who I am. I am Flora, better known as Flower Theatre, and I like to make stagey content here on YouTube. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in watching more of, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss another fun video. But with that introduction out of the way, let's dive into the 2024 production of Starlight Express and just why it's been deemed too different from every production that's gone before it. Now, upon stumbling across a lot of hate for this new production of Starlight Express on the internet, it kind of sent me down a rabbit hole into working out why people were so maybe against it, I think is the best way to phrase it. So I have been doing my due diligence and doing a lot of research and working out just what changes have been made for this 2024 production, and we are going to discuss it now. But in case you are here just out of pure coincidence and not because you are either in Camp Original Production or Camp 2024 Production in terms of this little war that seems to be going on online, I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of what Starlight Express is about. Now, Starlight Express is a Andrew Lloyd Webber production which debuted on the West End at the Apollo Victoria Theatre in 1984, and it has since seen many iterations, including UK tours, a Broadway run, as well as Australia and Japan tours, with the most recent production up until the Troubadour 2024 production being the Bochum production, which was last updated in 2017-2018. This German production being what most people are comparing this Troubadour production to, and where most of the dislike and disappointment seems to be coming from, although there are some fans of the original run from back in 1984 that are also raising grievances. But that doesn't really answer what Starlight Express is about. That's just a little bit of the history on the show. Now, the first thing to make very clear about Starlight Express is that it is about trains. Like, it's about racing trains, like that's what it boils down to, but there is story on top of that. But basically it is set in this fictional universe where trains race to become the fastest train in the world, and this fictional universe all takes place inside the mind of a child. This train race serves as the backdrop to the zero to hero little engine that could tortoise and the hare Cinderella story that ends up unfolding throughout the different races that happen. Our main train Rusty dreams of winning the race and therefore becoming known as the fastest train in the world, with his biggest rivals being Electra and Greaseball. And it's only when a somewhat mythical godlike entity known as Starlight Express inspires him that he's able to go on and win the race. And he not only wins the race, but he manages to win the heart of Pearl. But as I said earlier, it is basically just racing trains. So hopefully that synopsis brings you up to speed, as it is now time to dive into the changes. Now I'm going to break the changes up into sections. We're going to cover the changes to characters, the changes to songs, the changes to plot, and then finally, probably the most obvious one in this instance, that's going to be changes to the aesthetic. So let's begin by discussing what the 2024 Troubadour production changes with regards to Starlight Express's characters. Now, not all of the changes I'm about to mention with regards to the character lineup in the 2024 production are specifically Troubadour changes, as Starlight Express has been a production that has changed literally hundreds of times through each iteration of the production. But basically there are going to be changes that have happened since it closed in the UK, which was back in 2004. Now, some of the characters have not changed at all. We still have Rusty, we still have Greaseball, we still have Electra, and we still have Pearl. We also still have Dinah, but you're not here to learn about the characters that stayed the same. So we're going to start with our first change, and that is going to be that Popper is now Mama. And this was a change made in 2017. There was quite a few changes made in 2017, but the biggest change that happened overall to Starlight Express in 2017 was a gender rebalance of all of the roles to make it a little bit more even. And one of those changes was Popper changing into Mama. And in fact, the 2024 production upholds this gender balance amongst the cast, with it being pretty much a 50-50 split, which I really enjoyed. Then one of the most interesting changes with regards to characters I found with this show was the reintroduction of Belle. Now, the character of Belle has gone through many changes throughout the history of Starlight Express. She was originally cut in 1987, only to be brought back just to be cut once more for the 1992 revamp. But getting cut and brought back isn't the only change that this character went through. She also went through a bit of an identity change. When she was originally introduced, she was Belle the bar cart, but now she is Belle the sleeper cart, with the 2024 Troubadour production maintaining this sleeper cart identity for her. The next key difference in casting is going to be that the 2024 production has done away with the national trains. So instead of having the train from Japan, the train from Russia, the train from America, we've kind of done away with that and instead replaced them with more generic engines such as the Orange Flash and the Green Arrow. Now, aside from these new character names sounding like really cheesy superheroes, I do think it worked really well, and I don't think removing the nations from the show was particularly detrimental. It kind of enhanced the imaginary element of the show with regards to it sort of coming from a child's mind. As well as characters being changed, we also lost some characters with this 2024 production. This is likely a result of the limited space that we have at the Troubadour. It is a much smaller venue than, say, the Germany production, which needs a bigger cast to simply fill up the space and make it feel like more is happening on the stage. But let's have a little look at who we lost. Instead of having 6 electrical components, Elektra has now dropped down to 4 in the Troubadour production, losing Purse and Krupp in the process. The other 4 are all exactly the same. We also lost the Rockies, which were originally added to the show as a reference to the Rocky movies. There used to be 4, Germany currently has 3, and the UK has none. There are no hip hoppers in this production either. Dustin and Caboose have also been cut, along with Flat Top and a number of the coaches. The coaches no longer with us are going to be Buffy the buffet cart, Audrey the smoking cart, Carrie the luggage cart, Duvet the sleeping cart, who admittedly hasn't been seen in a post-2017 Starlight Express universe, and we also lost the 2nd and 3rd class carriages, who admittedly were cut when the original London production finished because they only ever served to give Greaseball more background dancers. The show not only took away characters, but it did also add in characters as well, and these are some of the changes that I actually really enjoyed, but have perhaps been some of the most controversial. In this show, Control is played by a kid who physically appears on stage. Now, I know that the Troubadour production isn't the first production to do this, however, it has been a point of contention. If you didn't know, Control is usually a disembodied voice to kind of give off the idea that we've all been shrunk down to the size of the train set and we're playing with them, or at the very least, this is happening inside the kid's mind. We're not supposed to see the kid, but it was very obvious that Control was a child in previous productions, whereas this gives us the Control as a physical character, and they're basically on stage for the whole show, and there's a lot of neat moments where you see Control moving and the trains mimicking as if the kid is controlling the trains, which I think really helps sell the idea that we are toys being played with, kind of like Toy Story Land over at Hollywood Studios in Florida. But I thought it was a really neat effect and a great opportunity for kids trying to get into West End productions. Another new character is going to be Tacita the Quiet Cart. Now, they are new as of 2017, not as of 2024, but it is a difference that some people have not liked since the original 1984 production over in London. So I just thought I would mention them under new characters anyway, because if you haven't seen the 2017 onwards production over in Germany, then Tacita would feel like a new character to you. And our final new character, and perhaps my favourite character in the show, is Hydra. He becomes the 4th freight train, with hydrogen obviously being the fuel of the future. Now, the hydrogen character kind of replaces the Dustin character. He is the character that goes on to win the final race with Rusty, with his character traits being the advantage Rusty needed to win in the first place. Dustin, if you didn't know, helped Rusty win by being heavier and therefore giving him more speed going down a hill than Elektra and Greaseball, whereas in this instance, hydrogen gives Rusty's steam engine a lot more oomph that ultimately sees him win the race, so they kind of fulfill the same purpose. And then the final change I wanted to mention is not necessarily a direct change to characters, but it is the track marshals. They haven't been added or removed, but I just thought it was really interesting that they are no longer on roller skates, they are on razor scooters, which I think is super cute and a great way of differentiating them and giving the show something like slightly different to watch as opposed to just watching skating. But as you can see, in its 40 years, Starlight Express has seen a lot of changes to its characters, and as I said earlier, not all of those changes are a direct result of the 2024 production, with a lot of the changes coming from 2017 onwards. So as I suggested, if you haven't seen the 2017 updates and have only seen older versions of the production, then I can totally understand why you would think these were updates made specifically for the 2024 production. But it is not just the character lineup that has changed. Some of the music in this production has changed as well. Now, as with characters, there have been a lot of changes to the music and the soundtrack of Starlight Express over its 40 years. But to keep things simple for me, I'm not going to track each change as it comes. I'm basically just going to list what is different between the 1984 production and the 2024 production, because otherwise we'd be here for hours, and I don't think anyone wants to listen to me talk for that long, so let's make this short and sweet. So the soundtrack as we know it in this 2024 production of Starlight Express is most similar to the soundtrack we got for the 30th anniversary shows, which includes a slightly longer version of I Am Me, as well as the removal of the song Right Place, Right Time. But we've also seen other songs cut from the original, and I'm not going to list them all, but they do include High Smile Wide, oh that's such a twister, High Smile Wide Style, and then the song Belle gets to sing, which I do believe is called Belle's Song. I know there's more songs that have been cut because this show has had its song list chopped and changed and cut around just in the same way it's had its characters mixed all around, and the changes in music have usually been in response to changes in the characters, so I don't want to list them all for you. But another thing to point out is that the orchestration of the Troubadour production is definitely different. It is a lot more electronic, which is likely to better suit the aesthetic the show has gone for, and the orchestration perhaps wouldn't have been changed if the, say, German production's aesthetic had been maintained and brought over to London. I personally really liked it. It definitely modernised the music a lot, and I know you're not here for a review, but I just thought I'd throw that in there, so I'm hoping we get a cast album. But along with the music changing, we have also seen a few little changes and tweaks to the story. As I mentioned earlier, Dustin is no longer the train that helps Rusty win the race. It is instead Hydra, the hydrogen freight car, which is perhaps, I think, the biggest change to the show overall. But other changes that have been made since 1984 include cutting the race scenes down from 5 to 4, as well as the Caboose character being done away with as the villain, with their role being taken up by Slick. A change made in 2017 introduced Pearl and Rusty as strangers as opposed to having them know each other before they meet in the show, which I do think is really interesting and I think works really well. The show's surprisingly short runtime I think would have benefited being made longer so we could flesh out their meeting a little bit more, but it still works. And then perhaps one of the biggest changes, aside from adding the character Hydra to this show, is going to be the fact they have made Greaseball and Dinah queer. And this was a change I loved, and a change I know a lot of people do not love, but I'm personally here for the queer trains. It's a slightly out there concept for a musical anyway, and updating it in this way, simply by changing the gender of one character, I think really made it feel refreshed and new. But I know none of those changes I have just talked about are changes that anyone cares about. You were all here to see what I have to say about Starlight Express's change in aesthetic. This is perhaps the most obvious change, not only in the costumes and makeup of the characters, but also in the set and the lighting design, and I think the change that has sparked perhaps the most controversy. Gone are the big train hats with rusty, greasy, oily, metally looking train costumes. Instead, we get stunning Gabriella Slade original designs for these trains. Now, I can make a whole separate video about all of the negatives everyone's ever had to say about these costumes, one of the biggest being that they don't look enough like trains. But to that I say, this story literally happens in the imagination of a child, so why can't they have colourful holographic rainbow trains if they want? The change in aesthetic is also a lot less industrial. It is very much leaning towards more futuristic. I kind of akin it to the aesthetic put forward by Tomorrowland in Disneyland and Disney World. It's that sort of dated futurism in a way that I actually really kind of enjoy. And actually, if you look at the costumes for the original 80s production, there was a lot of colourful hair and big shoulders going on, and I'm willing to guess that Gabriella Slade took a lot of inspiration from that. When interviewed about the look she put forward, Gabriella Slade was very outspoken about the fact that she had never seen the original production of Starlight Express, and she wanted these costumes to feel a lot more current so that younger audiences and new audiences could connect to them. All of the costumes share this uniformity, yet are all very unique and individual and very reflective of the characters wearing them. Let's take Greaseball's costume, for example. I think it's gorgeous. The yellow is very much a reference to the yellow worn in the German productions, with Greaseball kind of being a yellow goldy character. But if you look then at the black holographic, it is very kind of oil slick, very diesel-y, and I think that was a very clever choice. Rusty and Mama being steam engines and older engines are some of the few costumes that don't feature holographic fabric, which again, I think was a choice that I really, really liked. And Gabriella Slade was also very conscious that she needed to pay homage to what had happened before, but also utilise new fashion techniques that weren't available in 1984, such as 3D printing and holographic fabric. And so whilst I can totally understand people not liking the costumes or not feeling as though they looked enough like trains for their liking, I do understand why they went in the direction they did, because they have revamped the entire production. It's not a replica production, so it's not going to be a carbon copy of what we've seen before or see in Germany. It is its own original concept, and with the whole production being more futuristic, I think had we gone for that futuristic space-like aesthetic everywhere bar the costumes would have looked really outdated and really clunky. And I personally love it when theatrical design does something new. Because it's not just the costumes that have changed aesthetic, I've sort of hinted at it, but the set and the lighting have changed aesthetic as well. There is something very almost spacey or out of this world about this production, with planets being lowered in at various moments, as well as scenes where you feel like you're sitting amongst the stars. They also make great use of the screens they have at the back, as well as lighting in bold greens and bright blues, to really sell this kind of out of this world adventure. This production itself is less grounded in our reality, and I think everything comes together to really deliver that, whereas something like the production over in Germany is very much set in our universe, and I think that is maybe something that people aren't getting or isn't translating through simple pictures alone, and you do really need to see the production itself to fully understand that and appreciate it. But those are all the differences I could find, and I'm 1000% sure that I have missed some. So if you spotted any other differences, or I've not mentioned a change that you'd really like to tell people about, make sure you share them down in the comments, because I always love reading about them. I also think it's totally valid to have a preference for one production over the other. Maybe it's an aesthetic thing for you, maybe you don't like the introduction of new characters, that is totally fine. We just need to make sure that that discussion isn't then reflecting negatively on the cast and crew of the show, who are all working incredibly hard. I do think this show is going to be like Marmite, either people love it or they don't, but I have found it fascinating learning just how many changes Starlight Express has gone through, and I will definitely be heading back to the Troubadour to check out this show once more, because I absolutely love it. Whether you like the aesthetics or not, the show to a degree remains exactly the same, so I do think you should definitely go and check it out. But that is all the rambling about magical space trains that I have for you for today. So if you did enjoy this video, make sure to like it and subscribe down below. I have a lot of fun videos coming up. I've got a mini vlog from my trip to Germany, not to see Starlight Express, but to see something else. I've also got several reviews on the way for you guys, because I've got a lot of thoughts and feelings to share, as you can probably tell. So if that sounds like fun, like I said earlier, make sure you remember to subscribe, and thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!